First of all, this meeting is being recorded. It is on Zoom and also live here. The second would be for, if anybody could please silence their phones, put them on vibrate, that would be fantastic. And the third point would be, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the meeting. So starting out with the announcements I just made, followed up by we are going to review and discuss the questions or points that George Riley, Selectman Riley, brought up in last Monday night's meeting. He required more information. SAMA Enterprises and Jim Scalise from SK Design got that information back to us. It's been on the town website since Friday afternoon. After we review those, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Scalise for any further discussion. He's going to turn it back over to me. And then we are going to open it up for public comment and questions. We're going to open that up for 30 minutes to start with. We are reviewing the topics from tonight's discussion, not last week's discussion. We had a 3-hour and 15-minute public discussion. Everyone was given ample time to discuss those issues last week. So this is pertaining to this week's questions and answers. After that, we will close the public hearing, and then there will be a discussion amongst the select board members, which obviously you will all be present for. Okay? So thank you for that. And the first thing we're going to do is start to review the questions from George Riley. Item number 1, George asked for the name, address, and contact information of each owner and operator of the marijuana establishment. Where the owner is a business entity, the names and addresses of each controlling person, the COO, CEO, security information officer, etc. That's been provided. The landowner entity is Abbey Road LLC. The operating entity is SAMA Productions LLC. They are registered in Massachusetts. The resident agent for SAMA is William Luzier, is that how I pronounce it correctly? Okay. He is in Alston, Mass. Bill Hack is the owner and CEO. David Ross is the owner and COO. Jared M. Lazier is the owner and principal grower. And John Heck is the owner and security officer and also contact person in the event of an intrusion or other event at the site. Were you satisfied with those responses, George? Okay. Number 2 is evidence that the applicant has site control and the right to use the proposed site as a marijuana establishment. Such evidence shall be in the form of a deed, purchase and sale agreement, lease, or other legally binding document. Lot 8, where the project will be sited, is owned by the above described entity that is controlled by a partner of SAMA. Lots 6 and 7 are also owned by the same entity. See attached documents. There is both the purchase and sale agreement and the Abbey Road land warranty deed. They are both on the town website. Were you satisfied with that information, George?
As far as the town is concerned, as far as concerns the town and anything pertaining to the special permit, yes, it is satisfactory.
Mark, do you have any questions? Okay. Question 3 was regarding sound mitigation measures that minimize increases in ambient sound levels, including variable frequency drives to reduce fans and fan sound when feasible, and or installing fan treatments, referencing silencers or acoustically lined plenums. There's an attached document that's on the website. I will also read, I believe I have it here with me, what that stated from Horatech Greenhouses, which is the manufacturer of the greenhouse. So from Horatech on their letterhead, it says, in regard to the noise concern for SAMA's ventilation, several factors give us confidence that ambient noise will not be a disturbance to our neighbors, particularly regarding the perception that greenhouse fans will create a lot of noise. Each greenhouse will have only one fan that exhausts to the exterior. Each fan will be mounted on the western side of each greenhouse facing towards the state forest. At the time of construction, we will select a 4 or 5 blade model from a respected manufacturer that offers the lowest noise levels. It is generally accepted that the greatest noise emanates from airflow restrictions and systems that use fans as part of the system that also uses ducting to move air throughout the structure. As SAMA will not be connecting these fans to any ducting in the greenhouses, the associated humming from ducting that causes the greatest noise disturbance will be non-existent. Additionally, fans will use variable frequency drives that further reduces noise. Fans will be thermostatically controlled and only turn on during the hottest periods of the day, and most typically will not turn on during the cooler evening and nighttime. Part of an energy conservation program calls for a schedule when only certain fans will be turned on, thus further minimizing the cumulative noise of all running at once. A question was raised about the potential use of a plenum, but in our experience, plenums are primarily used for heating systems. Our fans will give us direct drive motors, which are far quieter than belt drive units. The situational topographic configuration of the building's placement on the site will serve to further reduce the way that sound will travel. The majority of the buildings will be erected in a cut area that is at a lower elevation than the adjacent ground, and therefore sound will be buffered and not be able to travel in straight line of sight. That is from David Ross, the owner of Horror-Tech Greenhouses, and also one of the owners of SAMA Productions LLC. George?
Yeah, I think this at least goes in some direction toward addressing this question of noise. I was asked about whether it would be possible to do some kind of modeling that would anticipate what the actual noise production would be. My own feeling is that due to the complicated nature of the site and of the terrain and of the forest, that kind of modeling would be very difficult to do. And therefore, I think all we can do is to have this as an issue that would need to be monitored on site when this is actually constructed. And if the noise is excessive, then we'll have to address that issue at that time.
Mark, any comment? Okay, so you're satisfied with the answer, George?
For the time being.
Okay, thank you. Item 4 is conversion extraction laboratory. Which of the models or options offered will SAMA actually use? Meaning sign, design, air handling, etc. SAMA's response is our plan is to acquire the PX1 hydrocarbon extractor unit from Precision Extractor Solutions. They then listed the website and the link to that particular model and install it into their C1D1 rated lab. That's also listed, which in turn will be installed inside of our warehouse building. Market conditions at the time of construction will determine the size and features of the unit to be selected. Safety features of the Class 1 Division 1 or C1D1 unit we will select will include it meets all MED, NEC, OSHA, and NFPA requirements. It conforms with all international fire codes, National Fire Protection, which is the NFPA, and liquefied petroleum gas codes, as well as NFPA 70 national electric codes. It will use 100% ETL listed and PE certified equipment. Our fire chief is in the back of the room. You might have missed the part where I said, please silence all your phones. You're the bomb, Ralph. I recognize those codes and language because I'm in construction. Is there anything in there that makes you uncomfortable? Okay. George?
Yeah, my understanding is that the hesitancy for SAMA to actually commit itself to a particular model of a conversion laboratory has to do with the fact that this facility is not going to be constructed for about 18 months. And during that time, conditions may change, and it's possible that different models might be available at that time. So it's prudent for SAMA to give us these minimum guidelines that the laboratory will adhere to, while at the same time leaving it open that they would be free to choose a particular model based on what's available at the time of construction. And that makes sense to me. Any comment?
Thank you. Question number 5, energy compliance guidelines from CCC are included, but no actual compliance measures are listed. How will SAMA actually comply with these guidelines? SAMA's response to that is also on the website, and I'll read it here tonight. SAMA will be cultivating cannabis in greenhouses with the primary source of light being the sun. A photon meter will measure the light intensity and trigger the artificial lighting to come on in low light scenarios such as cloudy days. In this case, the artificial light is used to increase the weight usable cannabis product per square foot of growing area, thus maximizing any inputs such as water, fertilizer, propane heating, and labor. When artificial light is used, it will be 1,000 watt lights on 12-foot spacing down the row with 7 feet in between rows. These activities will only occur during daylight hours. The light spacing will more than satisfy the requirements set forth by the CCC. Design and procurement will include identifying and sourcing the highest energy efficiency components, systems, and fixtures. SAMA will engage with energy efficient programs and use the services of 5 Stone Green Energy Consultants, as well as the Energy Services Group within Wolberg Electrical Supply. All procurement will comply with Mass CCC requirements such as OSHA, NRTL, etc., and other common regulatory authorities. SAMA will use data logging sensors in each greenhouse. The farm will determine a baseline for each variable to monitor and involve trained professionals to help conserve resources. SAMA's greenhouses are a unique design that involves a double layer of greenhouse film, which creates a 2 to 3 foot thermal bubble around the growing area. This thermal bubble is very crucial to conserving heat. Also, due to the nature of this design, condensation that forms from the warm greenhouse meeting the cold outside air will form and be contained in this layer, thus requiring less dehumidification efforts. Data from the performance of SAMA's greenhouses will be happily shared with any appropriate state agencies. In the event of equipment failure or replacement, SAMA will conduct in-depth research to determine if a better or more efficient model can be introduced. SAMA will work with local solar providers to create a plan to integrate solar panels into the property wherever feasible and supplement the main power as applicable. SAMA will monitor energy demand and adjust as necessary. SAMA will strive to use the minimum amount of energy possible. The lead cultivator will monitor and record the consumption of power, propane, and water monthly. Any usage level outside of the normal pattern will trigger an on-site inspection of equipment by a trained professional. Each day, employees will monitor equipment for noises or anything suspicious. That is also posted on the town website. George?
I think it's clear that from an economic standpoint as well as an energy standpoint, SAMA would be motivated to reduce their energy use as much as possible. There's a certain amount of energy that's unavoidable, and it's actually a considerable amount of energy. Cannabis growing simply uses a lot of energy, except for when it's fully outdoors. So I want to propose that at the very least, we would require as a condition that SAMA would, to the extent possible, procure this energy from renewable sources.
I mean, we haven't even put it to vote yet, so.
No, I'm just saying that if this were approved, I would like to have that as a condition.
So you're satisfied with those answers to your questions?
Yeah.
The 5 points of okay, great. All right. So then at this point, I would like to turn it over to Jim from SK Designs to see if he wants to either further explain that or possibly if you have any questions for Jim regarding those 5 answers. George, you can?
No further questions.
Okay. Jim, any further comments?
I prepared a letter responding to a Mr. Greenwald. I didn't know if you wanted me to put that on the record. He had...
to Mr. Greenwell?
Yeah. So we put that on the record. There was maybe 9 or 10 questions.
9 points, yes,
Yeah, and
correct.
I answered, directly answered 8 of those. One was about the deed and me being an engineer rather than an attorney. I felt that I was out of my, I didn't want to get out of my lane, so to speak, so
Okay,
I didn't answer that one. The first question was related, I think, to, let's see, wetland impacts. So the question was about the buffer zone, and if you look at drawing 3 of 9, there is a buffer zone drawn on this plan, although there is no buffer zone under zoning, which is what this application is for. There is certainly a buffer zone, which is a 100-foot setback from wetlands. And that buffer zone is not a resource area, but it is an area where the Wetlands Protection Act gives the town and the state jurisdiction over activities. And the intent is that activities within that zone would have to be conditioned or designed such that they wouldn't damage the wetland. But the land itself is not a resource. It's just a zone where you're getting close and you should pay attention. So the question was, why wouldn't you eliminate wetland impacts? And the fact of the matter is because there's a hillside, and the peak of that hillside is kind of in the lower right corner of the lot. If as you move the development away from, and I drew this several times, honestly, if you move this development away from the wetlands, the further you move it, the earth quantities go up significantly. So I tried to balance that, its impacts during construction, its cost. The project becomes a bigger footprint. So there's some good reasons not to move it any further. In many cases, none of the buildings actually are in the buffer zone. So it's just fence, some gravel. I removed all the stormwater. I have at least a 50-foot setback, actually, everywhere just to the limit of clearing. And in one case here in this corner, I'm 100 feet away. So it seems like with some revision that I finished up before the last meeting, this project seems to be at least reasonable in my experience as it relates to wetlands. So the next question was, why aren't the current plans posted? Well, they've been posted for several weeks. I did make a revision last week, but that's been on the website unchanged, and these plans aren't changed. So if there's questions related to the changes on the plans, they were all related to stormwater. Typically, I'm the only one who has any interest at all in stormwater, but if you want to talk about it, I can explain it in more detail. One question was about the area. So if you look at this drawing 3 of 9, maybe you can see it better here. It labels it at 4.7 acres. And that's what I said at the last public hearing. I think I said 4 or 5 acres. I couldn't remember the number, but it's 4.7. It was on this plan. It hasn't changed. That's the area inside the fence. And that's the area where you're going to have rooftops and gravel. And I mean, you have a 5,000 square foot building, and it's probably 5,000 square foot parking lot next to it. But the vast majority is in that 4.7 acres, which is about 10% of the project area. Now, there's a total of 8 acres in the clearing limits, but everything outside the fence that's not parking or driveway here is planted with grass or meadow, so it's not forested, but it will be green. So that's why I said it that way. If I confused anyone, then I apologize for that. But that's the explanation for the areas. There was a question, I think a neighbor asked me a question about quantities of earth, and Mr. Greenwald kind of went into kind of his own analysis, but it's my estimation that there's about 9,000 cubic yards of earthwork that need to either be exported or imported. About 9,000 export, about 7,000 or 8,000, probably closer to 8,000 import. And the way that works is every time a truck comes into the site, you load it with fill. But when it comes in, it brings gravel. So you can kind of make that in one trip. So the trips don't double, which I think was the estimation in the question, if I understood it correctly. Is it a large project? Yes. Is there a lot of earthwork? Yes. I did balance there's probably another 10,000 yards of earthwork that are balanced, meaning it's moved from one part of the site to the other with no trucks. So we made every effort to do that while kind of balancing all the different parameters at this location, wetlands, hillside, and this is the best we came up with. Street trees and landscaping, that's a tough one. This road, just looking at the street, is kind of an old logging road at this instant in time. It's difficult, if not impassable, it looks like to me as I drive up it. So what the thought was that this isn't a well-traveled road with a lot of folks in town driving by. So that we treated it as such. We put some trees back. We didn't do any clearing in the right of way. There's actually trees that are kind of in the street that would be maintained. But I fully respect if folks think there's a need for more. That was just, maybe I'm a city guy from Dalton, but my sense was that there wasn't a lot of landscaping necessary. If I'm off base on that, then I think a simple condition could correct that, and that's what I put in the letter. We're not hesitating to do it. We just did what we thought was appropriate for this location. So, and I don't mean to be disrespectful on that at all. It's just kind of from a land planning perspective, that was my personal opinion, and I could be way off, and we're happy to fix that if folks feel that way. I think that I had a couple of things left. The mounting height of the lights. The reason we picked a 15-foot mounting height, which allows me to put a few less lights, and it also creates a situation where you have delivery trucks, they're not bumping into your lights. So, but most of them are mounted right on the fence line. So if you wanted to lower them a couple feet, probably to 12 feet, 3 feet, that wouldn't really interfere. You could actually mount these lights on top of the fence at 6 feet, but then they would kind of be in harm's way as it relates to vehicles. So I was trying to balance that. 15 feet is a pretty standard height that we use. But again, if you wanted to lower those a few feet, if that was objectionable, I think we have that level of ability to do that without interfering much with the security or safety of the site. So again, that's at the discretion of the approving authority in my mind. From an engineering perspective, 12 to 15 works pretty well based on the fact that I've got 20 feet clear driving around the buildings, and that gives me enough height where my trucks and workers aren't bumping into them. But that was just the practical side of the lighting. And then if there's any other questions, about, there was a question about a detail on the drawing. I mean, these drawings aren't 100% construction drawings. They're permit plans. I mean, unfortunately, I draw some plans that never get built. So we don't usually draw them at 100% level. 50 to 75% is kind of where we're at, just to give you enough information to understand the intent. If there's it's very typical for me to have a condition where I would come in with construction drawings, should a project be approved, and review those with officials in town, maybe fire chief, the DPW, or the building inspector, of course, as part of a building permit. So we're available to do more work as it relates to details and work through those with town officials should the project be approved, and should you consider that appropriate. Thank you. That's all I have. And I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jim. I'm sure with the public comment section, there may be some questions for you. So we'll do it a little different tonight. We'll open it up to the floor first. We're going to do 3 minutes again per comment. Yep, no problem. And before we do that, I'm going to go to the select board just like I did the other night. So the select board first, and then the floor, then to Zoom. Okay, George?
So Jim, in your reply to Mr. Greenwell, you said that the